Now, let's talk nature. I'm joined in the studio by Aengus Kennedy of Nature Northwest. Aengus, good afternoon.
Good to be with you, John. Good afternoon.
Now, let's talk about, what I would consider now to be real pests, because ants are bad enough without them being able to fly, but this is the time of year where we get flying ants, and they're next to impossible to avoid. They don't last too long, do they?
No, just a few days. Just a few days in their flying stage.
Right.
And that, yeah.
But the individual ants might last a few days, but the season for them can be a bit longer, can it?
Well, they tend to emerge, so it's the reproductive phase that we're seeing.
Right.
So the ants are there, and ants can live for an incredibly long time. The queen ants can live for of the black ants at least, which is the most common. And we've 20 species of ant in Ireland. Most people aren't aware of most of them, and some of them are very specific to specific little habitats. But the black ant, the most common one you see, those queens can live for over 20 years if conditions are right. The workers, which is most of the rest of them, will only live for 1 or 2 years. But when they're reproducing, when those new females and the males emerge and they develop their little wings and start flying, that only lasts for a couple of days. And it tends to be this time of year when we get a nice little bang of heat, and we've certainly gotten the last day or two.
Right. And why do they develop wings, and what happens them after the season is over? Do the wings fall off, or what happens?
Yeah, it's interesting that the cycle of them, like so many insects. If you think bumblebees, now they have one queen, and one queen that's producing the eggs, and then at a certain time of year they produce a whole load more queens that start to distribute around. And ants are the same; they have the one queen, and that queen is dominant in the hive. No other queens are tolerated. But at this time of year, they produce eggs that are slightly different, and the males, and then the new potential queens, they all emerge, but they want to scatter from the nest. So the way that they have it is they develop these little wings. The other ants, of course, don't have wings at all. So they develop these little wings, and off they go, and they merge in huge numbers, all at the same time. And that's because they're really important for the predators. So all of the baby birds that are tick, tick, ticking around your garden, and you'll hear these little tick, 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 tick sounds around the place in the garden. And the baby birds, the fledged birds, and mum or dad that are changing their feathers, they're all hiding in our hedgerows right now, and they need food, and they need as much as they can get. So when all of those ants come out at the same time, most of them will get gobbled up by birds, by wasps, by spiders, by whatever can catch them. So their safety in numbers is
that their main purpose, fodder?
Well, it tends to be for most of them. It is, but really, what they're trying to do is they're trying to reproduce. So they reproduce with males, which are slightly smaller. So if you are lucky enough to have them, because I think they're wonderful things to see. If you're lucky enough to have them, say, landing on the tablecloth, we were eating outside yesterday, and put a wee tablecloth and eating up our battered ancient outside table, and some of the ants started landing on that, and you could see the females; they're distinctly bigger, and the males, and they fly off again. They'll mate. The males are finished. The females will keep going, looking for a suitable site, and then they're able to remove their own wings. So once they've got to an area they think is suitable, they remove their wings and they chew them off, which is a bit gruesome sounding to us, but they don't seem to mind that. And then they'll go in and they'll start to lay eggs and establish a whole new colony, which can last for, as I say, decades.
And is it male and female ants that are flying?
Yes, the two that are emerging now. Yeah.
All right, and they can I know that when they're on the ground, and if they get into your clothes or whatever, they can sting. The flying ones are the same?
Yeah, some ants, there's a little red ant, which is a much rarer thing, and it can shoot out a tiny little bit of acid that can make you a bit itchy, all right, yeah. The black ants don't really sting at all. They've the tiniest of bites, but they're so small they can't really penetrate us. But
it's an itch rather than a sting.
It's more than an itch, but they're not really a big pest in that kind of way. But they're hugely important in so many different reasons. So as extra food for many things, they're part of the food chain, but also for soil aeration, as they dig and dig and dig through the soil, and their colonies can be quite big, much bigger than you'll notice, and they can go on for a long way, and that helps with soil health. They're really important for pest control. They'll eat up lots of different types of insects and capture them and kill them. So that same insects that are bothering your food, or the same insects that are eating your crops and that kind of thing. And they're also important for seed distribution. Yeah. So there's some seeds, like primroses, produce a special little fatty substance specifically for ants attached to the seed. And the ants will collect those seeds, they'll stash them for later on when they're hungry, and then they eat that little kind of fatty substance thing. And the seed itself then is discarded, it's left. So when you see primroses next spring popping up in the ditches, that's thanks to ants. So if we get rid of all the ants, We'll have no primrose.
Okay, so they do have a purpose in the
They do indeed.
ecosystem, apart from being annoying.
Like them or loathe them.
And packing a bit of an itch or a sting. And is it true that they're more attracted to white? Is that true?
I don't know now, possibly because it certainly was a whitish tablecloth that they were landing on. But I don't know. I don't know. I think once they're flying into distribution, they're in such big numbers, and some of the more successful ones. Also, they're looking for a little bit of food themselves, something a little bit sugary or some kind of substance that's there. So perhaps they're attracted to that.
All right. Yeah. Okay, from one in a way, one pest to another, because jellyfish now in the fine weather, jellyfish have been out in greater numbers, and one jellyfish in particular would be fairly common, the compass jellyfish. Just describe, because sometimes we get confused with the various jellyfish, but would compass be the most popular or the most common?
Second most common. Most common. So the most common of them all is the moon jellyfish. And it's the one that's pretty much clear, but it has the 4 little kind of pink rings in it. And those ones have no sting for us whatsoever. They all have an ability to sting all jellyfish. That's how they catch their tiny, tiny prey. But those ones...
The most common one, the moon one, doesn't pack a sting.
Doesn't sting whatsoever.
But this one does.
It's a strange feeling if you're perhaps swimming through them, but because of the nature of how they are, but they can't hurt you in any way whatsoever. Right. Whereas the compass, which are a little bit bigger, they can get as big as a dinner plate, but more a kind of side plate size, if you can imagine that, from a tennis ball to a side plate size. And they look like the spokes of a wheel. So they're clear, but they have all these brown lines that head out from a central point. So that the spokes of a bicycle wheel or like a compass, points on a compass. And they have quite long little stingers. And those little stingers... jellyfish themselves are incredible creatures. There's been jellyfish, they believe, around for over 300 million years. So around before there was anything living on land, really, as such, or certainly any animals living on land. So they're around for a phenomenally long time, and they're incredibly successful, very, very simple creatures. And very beautiful if you're not being stung by one. Yeah. But if you're watching one from, say, from looking over the pier and wherever you are, and you see them, and the way that they expand their body and then contract and propulse themselves forward like a little kind of like a jet push, and then all of those little stingers trailing out behind them, very beautiful, very graceful things. Or if you watch any underwater footage of them, beautiful thing, but not so beautiful if you get tangled up.
No, we know that they can pack a punch, and if you get a sting, you'll know all about it. We'll get to this sting at the moment, but it's at this time of the year now that does it depend on how warm the water is, or is it just a seasonal thing?
There's a few factors. So certainly the warm water helps, and for some species in particular, it helps all right, yeah. Another big factor is the amount of rain that we have. So they like saline, they like salty water. So if it's been raining a lot, if you think of any of our beaches, been raining a lot, the water is cascading off the mountains, and that fresh water at first goes in and kind of sits on the edge of the beach before it starts dispersing. And any of them, with so many sea swimmers these days, and they'll all be able to tell you if it's been raining hard last night, the water will be a bit cooler, at least initially when they're getting in, because of that fresh water that's there. And that creates a bit of a barrier for them. But when we get a spell like we've had for the last while, it hasn't been raining for at least a few days, that fresh water disperses, and then the jellyfish are free to come in and come to go the way they want. But the warm water, the numbers can really, really shoot up. Yeah.
And if we do get stung, I was chatting about weaverfish during the week, and the advice is when you get stung by a weaverfish or get step on one of them, like you put it into hot water, or as hot a water as you can tolerate. It's different if you get stung by a jellyfish. The advice is to ice the area, or make sure the tentacles are taken out if there's any wee stingers left.
Yeah, there's very little can actually be done, but one of the biggest things is just to flush it. And flush it. So flush it with seawater, flush it with cold water, but just wash it down. Because they've these incredible little cells in them. Now, this is no comfort at all to anybody who's been stung. But the cells are one of the most complicated cells that are out there of any single cell. Because within that little stinging cell, they have a little harpoon, which has the bit of poison that's in it. Yeah. And they have a trigger mechanism. So when they're touched by anything, they're not after you, but just if you happen to brush past them, that triggers the little spring mechanism, which shoots out this tiny, tiny harpoon, which then penetrates the skin, and in goes the poison.
Right.
All of that is wrapped up in one little cell, which is an amazing thing. But you want to try and wash that off as much as you can. For most of our jellyfish, they don't really penetrate very deep, and if you can wash them off pretty quick, you will help. Certainly the likes of those compass, it's not much more than a nettle sting, and usually it'll go away pretty quickly.
Okay, so usually they're not the wee stingers are not embedded; they can be washed off.
They can be washed, yeah, to a certain extent. Yeah. Once the toxin has gone in a bit, it's going to irritate the skin and keep irritating the skin. But the thing is, wash them off as quick as possible. And there might be more tentacles that you haven't. If you've got caught up in one, there might be more tentacles that you just haven't kind of engaged as yet. So just flush down, wash with fresh water as quite fast.
Because even though those tentacles are detached from the jellyfish, they can still sting.
They can still sting. For many hours afterwards. Yeah. So if you see a jellyfish washed up on the beach, leave them alone. Fascinating things to look at, but leave them alone. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Then from jellyfish to birds, and there's I suppose we always have a challenge with, most of us would have a challenge with identifying various birds. We will know a few, and then there'll be others, especially smaller birds, and we won't be able to work out exactly what they are. Now, you've talked plenty about swifts on the show in the past, but in the same family, what's the name of the family?
It was the hirundines. So
all right,
they're slightly different.
I was thinking of a more common name for them.
Well, there's the swallows and the swallows and the house martins would all be one group.
Okay,
and then the swifts
swallows,
would be
house
different.
martin, and sand martin. So
yes, yeah,
they'll be all in the one group.
So they're like cousins, I suppose you could say ecologically. Yeah,
and they all have forked tails, including the swift. They all have forked tails. Now we know the swift sort of lives in the air, but the swallows and the sand martins and so on, we'll see them down at ground level, and we'll see them sitting up on wires, and they're easier to focus on, I suppose. So they just the first one to mention for those who might see them go, I wonder what bird is that? Well, swallows. How do we know what's the distinguishing features on a swallow?
So a couple of things with the swallow. One, it's dark, the whole back of it. So the top of it is dark. So and you might think, well, how am I going to see above the bird? But they're constantly they're amazing flight. They're constantly turning and jinking, catching insects, because all they eat is flying ants and all the other characters that are flying in the sky. So you'll see them as they twist and turn, and if their back is completely dark, and they have long tail streamers, well, then you have a swallow. If the back is completely dark and they don't have tail streamers, you might have a swift, because swifts are also completely dark. So the two of them are completely dark, but the swallows, both mum and dad, have very long streamers that come out of the tails. That distinguish them.
And they're widespread. And you see them in farms and villages and towns.
They estimate over 1 million swallows come to Ireland, come to our shores every year, and so they're our most common migrant, and they come in vast numbers. The very first start arriving in April or so, and then they get backed up in May, sometimes even more coming in June, and they come all the way from South Africa. That's the wintering grounds. So in a straight line, that's 10,000 kilometres away, and of course they don't just fly in a straight line. So the distance these characters cover is phenomenal. And they've come all this way, and they have been coming all this way since before we were here, and they're coming here just to eat insects. And they hoover up maybe 700 insects a day per bird, a vast number of insects. So as a pest control thing, they're hugely important. If you don't like flying ants, or you don't like the midges, or you don't like whatever else that's flying out there, the swallows, we need more swallows. And they do a massive kind of ecosystem service for us in that way. And then they go into our sheds, or they go into our barns, or some kind of covered area. That's the other way to tell swallows. They'll be the only one of that group that will go inside a building to nest.
Okay. So light underneath, dark on top, and that long forked tail.
And then a wee touch of red, but that's harder to see unless they're perching and resting. In Germany, they'll call them the wirebirds. Now, some of the others go on the wires as well, but the swallows you'll often see, and this time of year you'll see big lines on them, because already out of my shed there has been mum and dad, of course, and the 4 baby swallows. And the 4 baby swallows, they will look like some of the other guys because they haven't developed their long tail streamers yet, but they're still dark on top and have that little red patch then underneath.
And then the house martins, they have a forked tail as well, but it's only out of the very edges. It's slightly different. It doesn't make a V shape the same way.
Yeah, and that's one of the big tells. So they won't have that, and they won't have those extra long streamers. Another big tell for them is on lower down on their back on top, so on the rump, is a white patch. So you'll see the white patch on their back. And then another great tell for the house martins is as they're flying, the swallows tend to swift and swoop, and of course the house martins will do that as well because they're incredible flyers, incredibly agile creatures. But as one of the books I remember reading, they tend to indicate, like they turn on an indicator when they turn. So if you see them in the evening time, these birds will often come back to their nesting. And so if you're lucky enough to have them nesting on or around your house, in the evening time when the air is getting a bit cooler and the insects are getting a bit lower, that's when they're coming in and they're swooping above your house and they're tidying up those insects for you. But the swallows will be swooping back and forth. The house martins will often seem to do a little flick of the tail before they do a fast turn.
Okay.
And that turn, when they turn like that, I just think they're amazing things to watch. I always think they're going to drop out of the sky because they don't seem to be beating their wings that much. But no, they don't, of course, you know. They do that fast little turn after another bug, eating, as we say, hundreds a day, you know.
And often seen near muddy puddles because they use mud in their nest.
Yes, both the swallow and the house martin will make their nest out of up to 3,000 little balls of mud. And a couple of years ago, I managed to get a license off the national parks, and I put a camera on one of the nests being built inside the shed. And they put down their line of mud balls, and then they get little stiff bits of grass, old grass from last year, old little roots and things from last year, and they put it down just like the worker would put steel into the concrete. Mm-hmm. And then another line, and then more of that grass. They're really reinforcing it, and they make that whole bowl. And the house martins will build on the edge of your house, whereas the swallows will build inside your shed. Yeah.
And then the sand martins, I presume, they'll build in sand.
They'll build in sand. So you think of all the little sand hoppers that are eating up the seaweed. If you or your kids have ever kicked over a bit of seaweed and all these little characters have jumped up, that's the little sand hoppers that are breaking down the seaweed and turning it into an organic matter for other creatures, but or for plants. But the house martins thrive on that, or the sand martins thrive on that, and other insects that are going by. And they'll make a little hole inside sand dunes, inside steep little cliffs of the sand dunes. So a very fragile home, because you think of how easy it is for those sand dunes to collapse in a winter storm, or if we're running across them, or the kids are jumping up and down on them, or we're driving the quad over them. It's just one of the many reasons that we need to protect our sand dunes. Our sand dunes protect our land, protect us from the ocean, but they are fragile ecosystems and very fragile to trampling. The little grasses, the roots of the grasses are holding them together. And those sand martins that have come all the way also from Africa, they're relying on that sand dune to be there so they can bury a little hole. They'll fill it full of feathers they'll catch in the sky themselves, and then mum plucks feathers off her tummy. And she'll put those feathers inside the nest, makes it nice and soft. But of course, it also means her skin will be touching the eggs, which helps them to incubate, because the feathers are such good insulators that they have to have that skin contact. And
like a swallow, they have a forked tail, but the V is much smaller.
It's not as pronounced like the swallow because it doesn't have those streamers. And then the other thing is they're a browner character. They're much browner than the other birds. Right. And they can be hard to tell apart from the house martins. But browner don't have as pronounced a white rump on the back. And then, of course, a lot of these things, when you're trying to learn different birds or different creatures, where is it? And if you're seeing them all scooting up and down the beach, it could be either, but there's a good chance it's sand martins. So then you start looking a bit closer at the colours.
All right, someone says, could you please ask Aengus why I'm getting silverfish bugs in my house?
Silverfish bugs.
What's silverfish bugs?
So they're a flat they're little insects, little 6 legs. They have the 2 little tails on them that nearly look like the tails of an earwig, perhaps, but they're a bit longer.
Are they the ones that live in paper a lot?
Yes, you'll often see them in old paper. You'll see them in old drawers. If a drawer that you haven't disturbed to move around for a while, and you lift it up, you'll see these. They're very, very flat, and they're very closely related to things like stonefly larvae and mayfly larvae that live under the gravel in our streams. So they're an ancient creature. They've been around since the dinosaurs, and they do no harm whatsoever. Why they're there, they'll eat up little bits of paper and things like that, but they don't even destroy books as such, really. They're not regarded as a pest in any way, and they certainly won't bite you or do any bother like that. But good weather perhaps is giving them a bit of a boost, and then they've found a suitable little habitat. You'll very easily scoop them up and sweep them out if you want, but I tend to leave them alone. They don't do any bother.
Okay. All right, Aengus, we've run out of time. Thank you very much. Illuminating as always. Appreciate that. Aengus Kennedy there from Nature Northwest. Okay, let's take a very quick break, shall we?
Around the Northwest with Virgin Media. Winners of Bunkers.ie Best Broadband Provider for 2025. See virginmedia.ie.